Judge Marcus Johnson was driving his new Mercedes with a smile, enjoying the smooth sound of jazz and the scent of a new car. After years of dedication, sleepless nights, and battles against prejudice, he had finally earned his place in this exclusive neighborhood. However, the feeling of accomplishment was abruptly interrupted by flashing red and blue lights behind him. Adrenaline surged through his body as he wondered what he could have done wrong. He wasn't speeding, and there were no signs of trouble. With a look of disbelief, he pulled over to the side of the road. Officer Karen Michaels approached with an authoritative stance, her hand resting on her weapon. "License and registration," she demanded, her voice firm and cold. Still stunned, Marcus found himself reaching for the documents in the glove compartment as a wave of confusion washed over him. "May I ask what the problem is, officer?" He tried, but she ignored his question, taking the documents from his hand with a skeptical expression. "Step out of the vehicle, now." Her words cut through the air, and disbelief filled Marcus. "Excuse me, but this doesn't make sense. I'm Judge Marcus Johnson, and this is my car. There must be some mistake." He struggled to stay calm, but the pressure of the situation was palpable. His heart raced in his chest, and he could feel the curious gaze of neighbors watching from their windows. Indignation began to grow inside him, but he knew losing his composure wouldn't help. "Officer, please check my identity before making any rash accusations," he insisted. But his plea seemed to fall on deaf ears. As he stepped out of the car, shame and anger mixed together. He realized he was being treated like a criminal, and the pain of that reality hit him hard. Confused and irritated, Marcus exited the vehicle, now surrounded by Officer Carter's imposing presence. The cold touch of law enforcement around him was a bitter reminder that, despite his success, he was still seen as a suspect. When Carter began to frisk him, the world seemed to slow down. Every touch felt like an invasion, a humiliation that reminded him of all the injustices he and others like him had faced over the years. "This vehicle matches the description of a stolen car," Carter said, her voice firm, but Marcus could detect a hint of doubt in her eyes. "We received reports that an identical car was stolen in the area last week. But I bought this car 3 days ago. I have all the documents." Marcus's frustration was evident, but he knew that yelling wouldn't solve the situation. He took a deep breath, trying to stay calm amid the chaos surrounding him. "You can't just treat me like a criminal without checking the facts." Carter hesitated for a moment, her eyes glancing at the documents he had handed over. The silence hung in the air, heavy like a shadow. Marcus saw the curious looks of neighbors now gathered in small groups, watching the scene unfold. He felt a knot forming in his throat. It was the first time he had felt so exposed and vulnerable, and the idea of being discredited because of his skin color only made him angrier. "Look, I understand you're just doing your job." He tried to defuse the situation. "But this isn't just a misunderstanding. I'm a judge and I live in this community. This approach is disproportionate and, frankly, unacceptable." Carter seemed to listen, but the pressure of the situation still weighed on her. She glanced at the radio on her belt as if considering calling for backup. Marcus, in a moment of clarity, realized he needed to act. The injustice he was facing wasn't just his, but that of everyone who had been silenced or misjudged because of their skin color. "Officer Carter, please, don't let prejudice influence your decision," he pleaded, his tone calm but still firm. "I'm just following orders," Carter replied. Carter ignored Marcus's pleas, her expression remaining rigid as she began to place handcuffs on his wrists. Marcus felt as if the entire weight of historical injustice was concentrating on his arms. It was as if he were being reduced to nothing more than a number, a suspect, rather than the respected judge who had worked hard to build his career and his community. "You can't do this," Marcus said, his voice firm, though a knot of anxiety was forming in his stomach. "I'm Judge Marcus Johnson. This isn't just a traffic stop. You're making a grave mistake. Please call your superior and verify my identity." Carter hesitated, her hand trembling slightly as she held the handcuffs. She could see the frustration and indignation in Marcus's eyes, and something inside her began to stir. But instead of backing down, she seemed more determined. "We have protocols to follow. It's just a matter of safety." "Safety?" Marcus repeated, every syllable laced with disbelief. Do you really think handcuffing a judge in his own car is a matter of safety? This is an abuse of power. He knew he needed to remain calm, but each word felt harder to say as the reality of the situation weighed on him. He felt the eyes of the community around him, many of whom knew his story, his effort, and his commitment. The feeling of being watched as a criminal was a devastating blow. He wasn't just a victim of a mistake, he was a symbol of what many others faced daily. How could he be an example of justice if he couldn't defend his own dignity? "Please, do the right thing," he implored, his voice soft but full of determination. "Call your superior. I have the right to defend myself." Finally, Carter stepped away to use the radio and call her superior. Marcus felt a mix of hope and anxiety. It was a small step, but one that could lead to a significant impact. He needed to use this moment to change how the police saw him, and by extension, how the community viewed justice. The tension hung in the air as Marcus awaited the radio response, each second dragging on like an eternity. Finally, Captain Stevens' voice echoed over the frequency, confirming his identity and instructing Carter to end the stop. As soon as those words were spoken, a momentary sense of relief washed over him. But he knew the battle wasn't over. The feeling of injustice still burned inside him. Carter, visibly shaken by the revelation, lowered her head, but Marcus wasn't about to let the situation dissolve without making a clear statement. He took a deep breath and turned to her. This situation should never have happened. What happened here is a clear example of racial profiling. You stopped me for no reason, and now I'm handcuffed in my own car as if I were a criminal. This is unacceptable, he continued, his voice firm, but emotion beginning to seep through. It's essential that we recognize that these actions not only harm the individual, but also the trust between the community and the police. At that moment, Captain Stevens arrived, his expression concerned as he took in the unfolding scene. He quickly approached, realizing the gravity of the situation. "Judge Johnson, I'm deeply sorry for this," he said, his tone sincere. "This shouldn't have happened. I promise we'll investigate this incident. We need to understand what went wrong here." "Captain, I appreciate your apology, but this isn't just about me. It's about everyone who has ever been stopped and treated with suspicion simply because of the color of their skin. We need to work together to ensure this doesn't happen again," Marcus insisted, his voice filled with determination. Carter stood silent, looking at the ground, clearly embarrassed by the situation. Marcus realized that she wasn't the enemy, but rather part of a system in need of transformation. We're all here to serve and protect the community. But that starts with respect and understanding. What kind of example are we setting? As news of Marcus's initiative spread, a sense of hope began to take hold in the community. People of all ages and backgrounds started to mobilize, many of whom had never before engaged in discussions about justice and equality. The impact of Marcus's experience with police profiling had awakened a latent need for change, and now the voices that had once been silenced were beginning to rise. On that sunny day, the town's central square was transformed into a vibrant gathering spot. Handmade posters with messages of support and calls to action hung from trees. Conversations echoed in the air, blending hope and determination. Every face that passed reflected the urgency to be part of something bigger, to fight for justice and equality. Marcus was there, talking with residents and listening to their stories. He realized that many were ready to share their experiences of discrimination and prejudice that they had endured over the years. He listened intently, feeling the emotional weight of each account. "I've always been afraid of being stopped by the police," an elderly woman said, her eyes filled with tears. "But you've given us courage. We need to talk about this. We need to unite." "Exactly," Marcus responded, his voice filled with empathy. "This is our chance to create a real dialogue. If we don't speak up, nothing will change. Each of us has a role to play, and together we can make a difference." As the community mobilized, Marcus realized that the transformation extended beyond his initial vision. He wasn't just dealing with the incident that had affected him. He was leading a profound cultural shift, one that could resonate for generations. The fight for justice wasn't just an individual battle, but a collective journey that required everyone's participation. Marcus Johnson was a renowned judge, a man who had earned his place in the judicial system through hard work and an unwavering commitment to justice. After years of fighting discrimination and prejudice, he had become a respected figure in his community, a tireless advocate for civil rights. The movement he had sparked around issues of racial equality was finally reaching its peak, and the community was beginning to unite around a common purpose. However, that sense of progress was abruptly interrupted by a message that appeared on his phone. "Careful with what you're doing, Judge. You don't know who you're dealing with. Watch your back." The message made Marcus's heart race. The air around him felt heavy, and the shadows grew longer. The feeling of being watched overtook him. He had faced threats before, but this one felt more sinister, as if there was something much deeper at play. Adrenaline rushed through his veins as he wondered who could be behind it and what the hidden intentions were of those trying to intimidate him. Trying to stay calm, Marcus took a deep breath, but his mind was in a whirlwind. He reflected on the enemies he had made throughout his career, those who felt threatened by his fight for justice. What should have been a moment of celebration was now turning into a nightmare. He decided to contact Alex, his friend and detective. Alex had always supported him in difficult times, and now it was essential to have his help. As soon as the call was answered, Marcus explained the situation. The concern in Alex's voice was evident, and both knew the threat was not trivial. In the days that followed, the unease grew. While reviewing documents at home, Marcus spotted a familiar figure walking down the sidewalk. The man seemed to be watching him, and Marcus immediately remembered previous occasions when he had seen him, always lurking. A chill ran down his spine, and the need to act became urgent. Armed with his phone, he began to record discreetly, aware that the situation was far more complex than it seemed. Paranoia took hold of Marcus. He realized that the stolen car incident had not been a mere coincidence. It was part of a broader plan to discredit him. Now, the fight against racism that had motivated him also involved protecting his own life and reputation. Determined to share his findings, he met with Alex. The tension was palpable, and both knew they were dealing with forces that wouldn't hesitate to use intimidation to achieve their goals. As Marcus relayed his concerns, he realized that his battle wasn't just personal. It was a collective fight against a system that still perpetuated racism and corruption. An emergency meeting was called, and Marcus was nervous. As he entered the room, he saw familiar faces reflecting concern and hope. He knew that the truth he was about to reveal could change everything. As he began to speak, the atmosphere grew denser. Marcus spoke about the threats he had been facing and revealed that the person behind the manipulation was Jack Wilson, a respected businessman in the community. The silence in the room was deafening. Jack, who had seemed to support the fight for justice, now stood exposed as a traitor. The reactions were intense. The betrayal of someone they had trusted left a trail of disbelief and pain. The shock in the room was palpable, but as the revelation sank in, indignation began to grow. The community wasn't willing to be divided. They united, determined to confront Jack and the corruption he represented. Marcus committed to exposing Jack and fighting the corruption that had infiltrated the system. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Marcus and Alex worked tirelessly to gather evidence against Jack. He knew he had to act quickly before Jack could maneuver his influences to protect himself. Each new discovery seemed to reveal a web of lies and manipulations that extended beyond Jack, reaching powerful figures in the city. One day, while reviewing old documents at a public library, Marcus came across a file that stopped him in his tracks. It was an investigation into Jack and his company, Apex Builders, but what truly caught his attention were the references to unregistered payments and connections with members of the police force. With each line he read, the truth became clearer and more frightening. Jack was, indeed, part of a far more elaborate scheme to silence anyone who dared challenge his authority. But there was something even more unsettling. The name of an old colleague from the courthouse, a respected judge and longtime friend, appeared among the records. Marcus's stomach tightened. It was unthinkable that someone he trusted could be involved in such a dirty game. His heart raced as he processed the information. The feeling of betrayal was overwhelming. In that moment, Marcus decided he needed to confront his friend. He didn't want to believe that a conspiracy this wide-reaching was possible, but the evidence was undeniable. So he arranged a discreet meeting with the judge, hoping there was still a chance for clarification. However, upon arriving at the meeting, the atmosphere was heavy. The judge, visibly nervous, didn't seem at ease. Marcus tried to broach the subject delicately, but as soon as he mentioned Jack, his friend's expression changed. Fear and hesitation were obvious. "Marcus, you don't understand. This is bigger than us. Jack has allies. The police are involved. If you keep going, you could lose everything," he said, his voice trembling. Marcus was shocked. He was standing at a moral crossroads. The words echoed in his mind. What was his friend suggesting? That he should remain silent? That he should let corruption thrive to protect his own safety? The indignation grew inside him, fueling his determination. "I can't do that," Marcus replied, his voice firm. "I can't allow fear to silence the truth. This isn't just about me. It's about everyone who's ever been unjustly silenced." The tension between them mounted, and the conversation became a battle of wills. The judge, realizing he couldn't dissuade him, finally admitted that Jack held power over the city, power that could destroy the career of anyone who opposed him. And that was the most painful truth of all. The corruption wasn't just about individuals, but a system built on fear and silence. Resolving to act, Marcus called for one final meeting with the community, now more motivated than ever to expose the truth. He shared his findings and the betrayal that was rooted in the very institutions meant to protect them. The faces that once showed doubt now stood firm, resolute in their determination. The flame of resistance burned brighter. However, as the meeting progressed, Marcus received a new message, this time not a warning, but an invitation. It was from Jack, challenging him to a private meeting. He knew it was a trap, but the curiosity and the need to confront Jack directly were irresistible. On the appointed day, Marcus entered Jack's elegant office. The atmosphere was tense, and Jack awaited him with an enigmatic smile. They exchanged a few words, but Marcus quickly realized that the conversation wasn't about reconciliation. It was an attempt to manipulate him once again. Jack revealed his true game. He had compromising information about members of the community. Photos, recordings, everything to discredit anyone who opposed him. "Do you really think you can fight me, Marcus? I am the law in this town. You're just a black judge trying to challenge a system designed to keep you in your place," he taunted. Anger boiled inside Marcus. He realized the fight wasn't just for justice, but for his life, his dignity, and the dignity of his community. Adrenaline surged as he considered how to turn the situation around. The last thing Jack expected was for Marcus to play his own game against him. With an unexpected calm, Marcus smiled. "You're wrong, Jack. I am part of the change, and this town is ready to see the truth." Marcus's gaze didn't waver, even in the face of the threat. He knew the true power lay in the hands of the community. Tension exploded. Jack, in a moment of rage, lunged forward, but Marcus was prepared. Not only did he have evidence of Jack's schemes, but he also knew there were people ready to fight for justice. And more importantly, the city was beginning to wake up. What started as an attempt to silence Marcus would become a monumental turning point. Marcus left Jack's office, not only determined to expose the corruption, but now armed with a new purpose: dismantling the system that upheld inequality. The truth would be revealed, and with it, the strength of the community would become a tidal wave against injustice. And have you ever been wronged because of the color of your skin? Tell me in the comments below. Now, stay tuned for another moving story.